Okay, thank you. Yeah, so my name is David Copp. I'm an assistant professor of teaching in mechanical and aerospace engineering. And I converted 2 courses completely to SPEX grading last year in the winter and spring. So I was in a program last summer with Megan and the team. And so I learned a lot, and I thought I'm just going to go for it. And I waited until winter and spring to really, have enough time to do it. So I'm going to just briefly go over a couple of things that I think were most important for me as I was thinking about it. And I'm going to actually, this was a talk we gave at the T Summit a few weeks ago, but I'm going to actually start at the ending, which is what I also recommend for you all. So as Megan was just saying, start at the ending, think about what your students need to learn to succeed. So really, what are the core learning outcomes that you want them to learn? And think about all of this ahead of time, and that will help you sort of frame the whole thing, right? So before you even go into bundles and what are you assessing and all of that, think about what they should be learning. And so one of the courses that I converted was it's a sophomore level class on dynamics, so a physics class for mechanical engineers, civil engineers, and just general engineering majors before they pick a discipline. And so there's maybe close to 150 students in this course, and it's sort of a traditional lecture-based class. And so it really allowed me to go back and think about, what are the core learning outcomes? In engineering, we're fortunate to have an accreditation program. So we're nationally accredited, which means there are particular outcomes that students need to demonstrate to get the degree. And so I was able to sort of map those onto the learning outcomes for this class. And so ultimately, when I was done, I didn't start with this, but when I was done, I had a grade tracker that looked something like this. And I know you can't read it, but essentially what it does is it maps out the assessment bundles, which I have at the top. And then I have each row represents a different bundle, and then how many they need to pass in order to get that letter grade. Okay, so it's sort of just a graphical representation. They essentially go through the course and check these things off as they go along. And then, of course, here in the UC, we have plus and minus grades, so you have to figure out how you want to handle those. For me, it was sort of the number of retakes that they were doing, but there are lots of ways to do that. And then I implemented a token system to sort of manage how many retakes and resubmissions they had. And I also used the token system as sort of incentivizing students to do things I wanted them to do, like taking surveys and things like that. So they would receive tokens by doing these types of things, rather than giving them points for doing surveys and stuff like that. So one thing I really want to highlight here is that later on in Linda Nelson's book, she talks about student buy-in, and I think that's one of the most important things to make this system work. And she talked about an assignment that she calls How I Earned an A. And so I implemented that in my class, and it's a lot like a syllabus quiz, right? Where you want the students to look at the syllabus and sort of map out what they need to do in the course. This one is just a little bit more detailed and specific to specification grading, right? So you have a bunch of bundles, you have assignments that they need to do, and they can see right away on their syllabus in the grade tracker what they need to do to earn a particular grade. And so then they can look at your course schedule and say, well, if I'm going to get this letter grade, I need to pass this and this week and this and that week. And they can map out the whole quarter at the beginning, right? And so they can do that in this assignment, How I Earned an A, right? So take a look at the grade tracker, figure out what grade you want in the course, and what do you need to do to earn that grade. And so I think that worked out really well for me in terms of student buy-in and students understanding what they needed to do. So one main takeaway I had from implementing this was that this works really well for the students who are motivated and plan and are organized up front. They really like the agency that they have in this scheme where, they decide what they want to do, they do it, and then great, they get that grade, no questions asked, not stressful. But there's about a third of the students who often wait until the very end, right? They're not engaged in the course, and they're used to, 40% final exam, and they say, well, just make it up at the end, cram really hard and hopefully pull off a C or a B grade. And those students were actually way more stressed in this, right? Because by the time they were at week 7 or 8 or 9, they realized they haven't been keeping up with things, and now there's really no way to recover, right? There's no major assignment at the end that they can use to recover. And so really, I had to hammer this home, every couple of weeks, take a look at the grade tracker and make sure you're keeping up with things. And so that's where these types of assignments and giving them token opportunities really helps, because they need to be keeping up with the material. They can't just wait until the end. So in general, I would say it worked really well. Most of the students enjoyed it, but there were a few of them that that aren't used to it and need to be reminded how this works. So this is really what I'll call the order of operations, how I went about looking at redesigning the course. So first was learning outcomes. It really helped me to focus the learning outcomes, reduce them down to things that I could specifically assess throughout the class. And then looked at assignment bundles, things I already had, how could I group them together? And then how would those translate into particular letter grades based on which learning outcomes they're demonstrating. And then I put together a grade tracker that looks like this, and then figured out how many retakes I could handle throughout the quarter. And then finally, the detailed assignment rubrics were key, right? So I think we're going to talk about all of these in the next few classes. But yeah, making clear rubrics so that the students understand what do they need to demonstrate. And I actually found that with that, it was much quicker at grading assignments. So it was very fast to grade the assignments, pass, no pass, and then students could revise and resubmit. I had more time to give students particular feedback on the assignments because I wasn't trying to figure out how many points to give them or things like that. So in general, very positive. So that was one class I did, and I'm not going to show this whole thing, but another class that I converted was sort of a senior design project course, where there's a lot of students in these different projects. There's students that are in sort of 3 to 6 student teams, and they all work on different projects. And we want them to be able to demonstrate the engineering design process, right? Can they go from concept to design to sort of fabrication and deliver something to a company? And so it looks very different depending on the team and the project they're working on. And so this class I really enjoyed doing with specs grading because it allowed me to really focus on sort of these high-level learning outcomes rather than the particular details of assignments, for instance. So, for instance, I was able to narrow down just 7 learning outcomes for this class, and they're pretty general, right? Things like apply the knowledge that they've learned in their previous courses, communicate clearly, teaming skills, I have to sort of define that somewhere else, but, work on their teaming skills, demonstrate project management, these types of, high-level goals in these types of project courses. And then I had to, design assessments that would demonstrate those learning outcomes. So there's just a few assignments for this type of course. And definitely things like reflections or peer and student evaluations helped with sort of the teaming process. But you can get an idea of what this course sort of looks like. And then on the left is just a simple example of a rubric, but it doesn't have to be too detailed as long as you have more information somewhere else. But essentially, I have implemented sort of a 3-tier system, either a high pass, a low pass, or a no pass. So they needed to, receive a certain number of low passes and or high passes to get a particular letter grade. And this worked really well, right? So the criteria on the left was the learning outcome, and then they had to demonstrate a particular level of mastery. A couple of things just to highlight at the end. I really didn't see a change in course grades. So the grades were pretty similar to where they were when I was using points. Students liked the flexibility. They also liked, the agency. They liked that it was organized and they could see exactly how to get the grade they wanted. They were a little afraid up front that, there is no partial credit, but of course you remind them that you can revise and resubmit. This is all about mastery and learning and not about just sort of accumulating points. So again, reiterating this to the students is important. And let's see, I think I'll just mention a couple of takeaways. My conversations really changed from, can I get more points for this assignment to how can I better understand this concept to demonstrate it in the next time I take it. So I really enjoyed that, the shift to talking about learning instead of points. It's clear, it seems to be effective. I like the mastery learning approach. It sounds like, a lot of people in our group were already implementing types of mastery learning. And so it's pretty easy to transition to this type of framework. Again, I overall found that it was faster to grade things initially, and you can focus more on feedback. So that was helpful, especially in large courses. And then really the main con was the large setup time, right? So that's why you're here in the summer. That's why I took an extra quarter to set up these classes, because really being detailed in the rubrics and figuring out exactly what you want to assess and how you want to assess it took a lot of time. But I think once it's there, it's pretty easy to iterate. And so I'm feeling much more confident going in the second time to make this better. So overall, I say, definitely go for it. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you have over the next few classes.